We continue on the Talk Shop from Studio 255 in the Laramie Plains Civic Center. This segment brought to you by Perkins Restaurant and Bakery, H&R Block, and the UPS Store. This morning's guests, Don O'Toole and Merav Ben-David in Studio 255. I'm Eric Henderson. And this second segment, first we talked about otters and Wyoming changes in law and protective status. And we didn't deeply cover foxes. Don, would you talk about these species and the matter at hand of concern for your organization?
So there are two fox species that occur in Wyoming that are, they have very small populations. They're swift foxes. Swift foxes because they're small little foxes that can run incredibly fast. They can run, I think, 35 miles an hour. And the other one are gray foxes. I have never seen a gray fox. I have lived here for 34 years. I have never seen a swift fox, although I understand there are swift fox, or there were a swift foxes out near the city dump in Laramie. These are rare species, and one of the changes in the regulation that Game and Fish is proposing that if they are accidentally caught by trappers, trappers will now be allowed to skin those animals and then sell the pelts. And I think that is that's not a smart move on the part of Game and Fish.
That's clearly an opening for commercialization of the fur.
Yeah, I think
no question.
It basically creates a potential financial incentive to misreport or underreport bycatch of both swift foxes and gray foxes.
Deviance for profit.
Yeah, I just want to say that I have lived in Laramie for 25 years, not as long as you, Don, and I finally saw a swift fox along the Laramie River while we were tracking raccoons for another project.
Did you believe your eyes?
I stopped and I watched it because it caught a jackrabbit and it was eating it right in front of me. And I missed the raccoon, but it was such a neat observation. I cannot imagine anyone wants to kill this beautiful animal.
When you take in a moment like that in the outdoors, is there any more spectacular event that you can describe? I mean, that's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and it was close to sunrise. The sky above the fox and its prey were just turning a little gold. And the Laramie River was right there. It was just amazing. It was, I keep telling everybody who would listen to me that I'm the luckiest person on earth because of my job, that I get to observe, follow, learn, study wild animals in their natural environment. And in Wyoming, we're very lucky, and we should keep that. We should keep our public lands in public hands so other people can have these experiences. But, studying river otters over the 25 years I've lived here, I've been to places in Wyoming that I don't believe other people have. I mean, it's just me and the river and the otters. Amazing experiences. So
this is a segue, but where was your passion for the outdoors and its creatures and the organisms and the biology? Where was it born for you, Merav?
I think I was born with it. I was originally I was born in Israel and raised fifth generation Israeli. And my family tells the story that I would not eat anything unless my mom would get the chameleon out of the hedge and put it on the edge of the high shell. So I mean, that was always...
That was the test.
That was always in my genome, I guess.
Well, very nice. It's wonderful to have Don O'Toole and Merav Ben-David here this morning. Tell us more about the species of the fox and how do interested citizens and people in our audience, how did they join in your effort to discourage the commercialization of these animals with such low populations in Wyoming to begin with?
Well, swift foxes, and again, I have never seen one in my time in Wyoming. And this is why I live in Wyoming and why many of us live in Wyoming. We're privileged to live on a landscape that is replete with wildlife, including these guys. So swift foxes had, in the last 150 years, suffered a severe decline. They may, at the moment, be expanding westward in the state, so they're starting to be seen in sagebrush country. I know almost nothing about gray foxes. I've never seen one. I think I've seen some pictures, and that's it. And Merav may be able to speak to the ecology of both of those species and their role in the environment.
Merav?
Yeah, they're very rare in Wyoming, and like Dawn, I've never seen a gray fox. Their distribution in Wyoming is very, very limited, and so I don't see that.
Are some banded? Have Game and Fish or biologists have any successfully been able to track them scientifically?
Good question. The Game and Fish had a large camera trapping project trying to get at,
Cameras, okay.
yeah, at the distribution of swift foxes. The number of pictures that they have gotten was very low. We had, until recently, had a very large, again, with it, closely working with the Game and Fish, on spotted skunks. And so there is evidence that spotted skunks and swift foxes may have some overlap in the ranges. And we had hundreds of thousands of camera nights, trapped nights with cameras, not a single swift fox. So very rare.
When many people think about topics and issues that don't make a great deal of sense, or that make all the sense in the world and are completely better understood, when we follow the money, so much comes to light. So much comes to a greater, perhaps, understanding of motivation. Is there that influence in reference to these species and their futures in Wyoming? Is that a factor?
I think that's this is Donald speaking. I think that's part of it, because these pelts, they don't sell for very much. They sell for $40 or $50. I suspect there's a second factor, and that is Game and Fish thinks this is in changing the regulations and in folks reporting it to Game and Fish, I think they think this will help them generate numbers as to where both species occur. So that may be part of the reason, but it's a pretty high tax on those animals to have them commodified and then sold. What worries me is the loophole. There are other ways to gather data. Merav has mentioned one. It's not very efficient, and that is using camera traps. But if they want data on these animals, I don't think they should have to pay a death tax.
When you talk about the tracking, when you talk about the scientific measures to achieve the data that you're operating from, and many decisions are pending from that data awaited as well, what's the source of funding for the equipment? What's the sources of funding that have importantly been relied upon? Are those funding sources still available, or are they have they been challenged, or have they been threatened, or have they disappeared entirely? Are we operating? You've been at this more than 20 years. Is the data being compiled on equipment that's 20 and 30 years old, or are we fortunate and still have sources of support for this data coming? Because it strikes me that if Wyoming Game and Fish and other interested parties are going to be successful in tracking this information and getting accurate information, we got to look at funding.
Yes, absolutely. The Wyoming Game and Fish has been fortunate that their funding is independent of the legislature. Most of the funding for nearly all the funding for the Wyoming Game and Fish Department comes from hunting and fishing licenses. Many from out-of-state hunting licenses, they generate a lot more money than in-state. So the Wyoming Game and Fish has to balance how they optimize the revenue by selling licenses out of state, but also making sure that the people who vote for them or vote for the legislatures that support them get a chance at hunting. And some of that money from hunting and fishing licenses goes back into these species, let's say elk, deer, pronghorn, but some is allocated to non-game species, meaning species that are not harvested.
Right.
Trapping brings in absolutely no money. The trapping license is what, $15. So basically the main money is from hunting and fishing, going some allocated to non-game species such as otters and skunks and swift foxes and mountain lions and other things, or mountain lions are game species. But for example, the Wyoming Game and Fish in all over these years have funded my river otter research. Yet, unfortunately, in this case, they did not even bother to read my reports. But anyway, money has dried out from federal agencies. We're getting a lot less money for research with the current administration, which puts a big burden on wildlife biologists trying to understand what's happening.
Well, the talk shop and the two of you coming into the talk shop helps expand awareness, and with awareness comes greater education, and that education, I think, brings greater demand and attention from the public to where funds are spent, where they're invested, and there's no question that tourism depends on, at least in a high factor in Wyoming, wildlife opportunities to observe wildlife, and human opportunities to observe that interaction in its natural habitat. And so great deal learned here this morning on otters and foxes, and I'm a Wyoming native, and I can't think of a family trip, a road traveled, scenic byway or not, where it wasn't absolutely gratifying to count the wildlife along the trip from point A to point B. And you can't do that along a river, along a highway, if they're not around. And once they're gone, they're gone. We've visited with other guests on the talk shop about eagles and eagle habitat. We've talked about grizzlies and grizzly habitat, antelope, deer, elk, moose, and regardless of the species, I had a visitor from Walden, Colorado on the show recently talking about wolf migration and some of the handling of wolves in Colorado, in Wyoming, the differences, and some of those they're serious considerations for everybody to know. But like going to the polls, if you don't go to the polls informed, you may not be doing the best possible for your community and for the world that is around us. So Don O'Toole, Merav Ben-David, thank you so much for joining us, expanding our awareness. As we did in the last segment, final comments, final thoughts, how people get a hold of your organization, probably the best, but I will promise all listeners it will be published on the Talk Shop social media channels. Don, you with the last word.
So if you want to reach out to YCAP, YCAP is spelled W-Y-C-A-P, Wyoming Committee for Animal Protection, and just go to our website.
That's wyocap.org. Merav, your thoughts?
I think we need to speak up. We can't let things just slide by because when we give a finger, they'll take the hand.
Merav Ben-David, Don O'Toole, thank you for joining us. In future programs, September 5th, we will be talking trapping reform issues in Wyoming, current law, trapping incidents, and suggestions for change. Then the following Friday, 2 weeks from there, September 19th, we'll be talking about wildlife management, transformation, and history and impact, and current wildlife management practices in the state of Wyoming and the area. Look forward to these and more topics from the Wyoming Coalition for Animal Protection. Don O'Toole, Merav Ben-David, thank you for your time.
Thank you.